Toni Basil's story began in a way that felt like destiny, dramatic, loud, and full of lights. She wasn't born in a hospital or even at home, but backstage during her mother's performance in a rundown theater in Philadelphia on September 22, 1943. Her mother, Irene, was a vaudeville performer who went into labor mid-show, while her father, Michael, played in a jazz band in Atlantic City. When he received the telegram about his daughter's birth, he left his orchestra mid-song and hitchhiked home. The family name was originally Basila, but immigration officers at Ellis Island changed it to Basil. From the start, her life was filled with chaos, music, and movement. Her mother's dangerous stunts during pregnancy nearly cost both of them their lives. 8 months pregnant, Irene continued to perform high-flying acrobatics, taking black market pills just to endure the pain. When she caught a heavy sandbag mid-air, she began bleeding but finished the act anyway. 6 weeks later, Toni was born early, weak, and fragile. Those early years taught her something powerful, that performing wasn't just a job, it was survival. The Basil family lived backstage, sleeping in dressing rooms and old storage areas. Toni grew up surrounded by circus animals, dusty costumes, and performers who were always one meal away from going hungry. By the time she was 6, she was already helping her parents earn money by dancing for tips. Life was hard, but every challenge added another layer to the fierce, unbreakable woman she would one day become. Between 1948 and 1953, Toni's life was anything but normal. Her family never stayed in one place for long. They lived backstage in old theaters, sometimes beside elephants or under dripping ceilings. In one city, she slept in a room that used to be a morgue. School was never steady. She switched schools more than 20 times before she turned 10. But even though she missed out on friends and a stable childhood, Toni learned something much more valuable: how to survive and how to shine in front of people. When she was only 7, her mother forgot her dance routine during a live show. Without thinking, Toni ran on stage and began tapping to fill the silence. The crowd cheered wildly, and a talent agent offered her a contract on the spot. But instead of celebrating, her mother slapped her backstage, accusing her of stealing the spotlight. That painful moment changed everything. From then on, Toni became the breadwinner, and her relationship with her parents turned cold. When the family finally settled in Las Vegas, she split her time between school and smoky casino showrooms where her father played music. She practiced her cheerleading and dance routines between rows of slot machines, often limping home from exhaustion. Even as a child, she understood that success came with a price. When her father lost money gambling, Toni secretly saved coins from the casino floor to pay for her dance lessons. She wanted more than her parents ever had, not fame, but freedom. That drive would soon take her far beyond Las Vegas and into the heart of Hollywood. When Toni turned 18, she packed her suitcase, grabbed $47, and hitchhiked to Los Angeles. She dreamed of becoming a professional dancer and choreographer. But the reality of Hollywood hit her hard. She slept on floors, took low-paying jobs, and auditioned wherever she could. Her big break came when she worked as a background dancer in films alongside icons like Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley. But fame in the 1960s entertainment world came with danger. Women were often disrespected or harassed, and Toni quickly learned to protect herself. She stayed professional, never letting anyone take advantage of her. She appeared in movies like Viva Las Vegas and the TAMI show, where she saw firsthand how deep the racial divide was in Hollywood. Toni never forgot those moments. They shaped her sense of fairness and fueled her passion to fight for respect. In 1965, she gained attention for her energetic go-go dancing in Village of the Giants, which became a cult classic. The fame opened doors, but it also came with rumors and false stories that hurt her reputation. After leaving one film where she faced harassment, studios started labeling her as difficult, and she stopped getting roles for a while. Still, she refused to compromise her values. Toni was one of the first women in Hollywood to walk away from unsafe or unfair situations. That decision may have cost her jobs, but it earned her something greater: integrity. She wasn't just a dancer anymore. She was becoming a fighter. In the early 1970s, Toni Basil met Don Campbell, a creative young dancer who had invented a style called locking. Together, they formed the Lockers, a dance group that would change street dance forever. But their journey wasn't easy. As the only woman in the group, Toni had to fight to be respected as both a dancer and a leader. Some male dancers refused to take direction from her, but her discipline and talent eventually earned their admiration. The group performed in clubs around Los Angeles, often for very little money. At times, crowds threw bottles and Toni had to shield younger dancers from violence. Yet they kept going, bringing street dance to television shows like Soul Train. When producers tried to water down their routines to make them more TV-friendly, Toni refused. She didn't want to change the authenticity of the dance or erase its roots in Blackstreet culture. That choice cost the group lucrative deals, but it earned them lifelong respect from the dance community. Over time, the Lockers became legends. Their performances influenced generations of hip-hop and street dancers. Even though Toni's role as a co-founder was often forgotten in history books, her contribution to modern dance was enormous. She helped turn locking from a local street style into an international art form. Her story wasn't just about fame. It was about breaking barriers and giving dance the artistic respect it deserved. By the early 1980s, Toni was already a respected choreographer who had worked with big names like David Bowie, Tina Turner, and Bette Midler. But she wanted something more, her own music. When she got the chance to record her album Word of Mouth, she grabbed it, even though the record label paid her only $10,000, a tiny amount compared to her experience. One of the songs she recorded was originally called Kitty, written from a male perspective. Toni flipped the lyrics, added a cheer chant from her old high school, and turned it into something completely new. That song became Mickey. When record executives said she was too old to play a cheerleader in the video, Toni ignored them. She wore her real high school uniform and directed the video herself in one take. The result was magic. Mickey exploded on MTV in 1982, hitting #1 on the Billboard charts and becoming one of the biggest pop anthems of the decade. It appeared in commercials, movies, and sports games everywhere. For a moment, Toni Basil was a global star, but behind the success there was trouble brewing. Her record label went bankrupt, and her royalty payments disappeared. While everyone else made money from Mickey, Toni saw only pennies. Still, she stayed silent, trusting that things would work out. She had no idea that she was about to spend the next 40 years fighting for the rights to her own song. After Mickey, Toni's career took a painful turn. Her next album failed and she fell into debt. The fame faded, but the song never did. It kept playing in ads, at football games, and in movies. The problem was Toni wasn't getting paid. In 2017, she discovered that her music rights had been secretly sold and traded by corporations through offshore accounts. Her work was passed around like poker chips between shell companies. She had earned less than $3,000 in royalties over 4 decades, for one of the most played songs in pop history. Heartbroken but determined, she took the companies to court, including Disney and Viacom. Her legal battle uncovered shocking details about how artists' rights were manipulated in the entertainment business. Despite being in her late 70s, she refused to give up. In 2022, after years of struggle, she finally won back ownership of her Word of Mouth album and the rights to Mickey. But the victory came too late for her to recover all she had lost. Even with the ruling in her favor, the payments were delayed by appeals and legal red tape. At 82 years old, Toni was still waiting for what she was owed. Her story became a warning about how creative people can be robbed of their success, even when the whole world knows their work. Despite all the injustice, Toni Basil never stopped dancing. She continued to work as a choreographer and teacher, helping shape modern performances for stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Her creative influence could be seen everywhere, even in the famous bend and snap scene in Legally Blonde, which came from one of her dance routines. But she rarely got full credit for her contributions. Over time, fans and artists began recognizing her role in shaping pop culture. In 2025, after decades of financial struggle, Toni finally received her first 6-figure royalty payment, around $180,000, from a Dolby Atmos remaster of Mickey. Instead of keeping it for herself, she used the money to fund dance scholarships for underprivileged girls. She turned her pain into purpose. Today, Toni is in her 80s but still performs, teaches, and even posts dance videos online. She continues to inspire a new generation of dancers who see her as proof that age doesn't define talent. Toni Basil's life started in chaos, under the hot stage lights of a second-rate Philadelphia theater. Her mother, Irene, was a daring vaudeville acrobat who refused to stop performing even during pregnancy. In the middle of one of her acts, a sandbag fell from the ceiling, striking her side. She finished the show anyway, but within hours she was bleeding heavily. Her husband, Michael, was hundreds of miles away playing jazz in Atlantic City when he got the news. Without hesitation, he abandoned his orchestra and hitchhiked through the night to reach her. 6 weeks later, in September 1943, Toni was born prematurely, small, weak, but already surrounded by music and applause. From the very beginning, her world revolved around show business. Theaters were her playgrounds. She learned to walk backstage while jugglers practiced and singers warmed up their voices. Her mother, tough as steel but emotionally distant, treated performance like religion. She taught Toni discipline but not affection. When Toni cried, her mother told her to save the tears for the stage. Her father, a kind man with a gambling habit, would disappear for days, chasing luck that never came. The Basil family didn't have much, but they had rhythm, movement, and the hunger to perform. Even as a toddler, Toni danced to the hum of her father's trumpet. The applause she heard at her mother's shows was the first sound she fell in love with. Toni's early years were defined by constant motion. The family rarely stayed in one town for more than a few months. They lived backstage in theaters, sometimes in storage rooms or old circus wagons. School was a luxury. She attended dozens, but never stayed long enough to make friends. Her teachers described her as bright but distracted, a girl who would start tapping her feet instead of paying attention. But dance was her language. When she was only 7, fate threw her on stage. Her mother froze during a routine, forgetting her steps, and young Toni rushed in to save the act. The crowd roared with laughter and applause. For a brief moment, Toni was the star, but backstage her mother's hand came down hard. "You don't steal the spotlight," she hissed. That slap taught Toni that fame wasn't always kindness. By her teens, Toni had already become the family's main earner. She danced in casinos, performed in small revues, and even helped choreograph her mother's shows. But her parents' marriage crumbled under the pressure of debt, alcohol, and lost dreams. Toni learned to survive on her own, saving tip money in jars hidden under her bed. Las Vegas became her home, but not by choice. The smoky air, flashing lights, and the sound of coins clinking in slot machines were constant reminders that everything, even dreams, had a price tag. In 1960, Toni graduated from Las Vegas High School. Her teachers remembered her as a firecracker, restless, talented, and determined to leave. She left home with $47 and took a bus to Los Angeles. Hollywood was a different kind of jungle, filled with bright promises and darker truths. She rented a tiny apartment with no air conditioning and survived on canned soup while auditioning for dance roles. Her first big opportunity came when she was cast as a background dancer in movies like Viva Las Vegas with Elvis Presley and Pajama Party with Annette Funicello. She was young, energetic, and eager to prove herself. But the industry was ruthless. Directors often dismissed her ideas or made inappropriate advances. She quickly learned how to navigate sets with caution, smiling when needed, silent when safer. Still, her reputation as a disciplined, creative performer began to grow. She didn't just dance. She thought about the rhythm, the camera angles, the story behind each movement. Her mind worked like a choreographer's even when she was just another name in the credits. People started to notice her sharp instincts and original ideas. Within a few years, she was not just dancing, she was designing movement for others. By the early 1970s, Toni's influence in the dance world exploded. She became friends with rising musicians and artists in Los Angeles, people who were blending music, street performance, and culture in new ways. That's when she met Don Campbell, a young man who invented a style of dance called locking. Together, they formed the Lockers, one of the first street dance crews in history. Toni wasn't just a member. She was the group's organizer, stylist, and mentor. She taught the dancers how to perform for television, how to structure routines, and even how to protect their creative rights. Many people didn't realize it then, but the Lockers were laying the foundation for modern hip-hop dance. Their performances on Soul Train and Saturday Night Live were revolutionary, fast, funky, and full of personality. They made audiences cheer and dancers dream. Yet Toni's role was often minimized because she was a woman in a male-dominated space. Reporters called her the group's manager, not its creative partner. But she didn't let that stop her. Her sense of rhythm, style, and theatrical presentation made the Lockers stand out from everyone else. The white boots, bright outfits, and bold expressions, all her vision. She turned dance into storytelling, and that would later inspire music videos for decades to come. By 1981, Toni Basil was already a respected choreographer working with top artists, David Bowie, Bette Midler, and talking heads among them. But she wanted to create her own